Julian dropped to one knee, holding a ring made of twisted wire, his eyes oddly serious. "Marry me, or we're on the street." Elara and Julian had lived together for 3 years like perfect roommates. But this morning, their new landlord sent an ultimatum. Married couples only. Neither could afford to leave. A knock echoed through the loft. Mrs. Halloway, here to verify their marriage certificate. Julian grabbed Elara's hand, his palm warm against hers. "Just follow my lead." She looked at the wire ring on her finger, then at the man she'd shared coffee and silence with for 1,000 mornings. The man whose laugh she knew better than her own. The man she'd never let herself want. "Showtime," he whispered. Morning light filtered through the tall, industrial windows of the loft, turning dust motes into floating gold. Elara stood at the kitchen counter, paintbrush tucked behind her ear, watching Julian pour 2 cups of coffee without asking how she took hers. He never had to ask. 3 years of synchronized mornings had taught them each other's rhythms better than any marriage vow. "You're up early." His voice still carried sleep around the edges, rough and warm. "Client deadline." She accepted the mug, their fingers brushing in the transfer. Such a small touch, one that happened a dozen times a day, but her skin always noticed. "You're up late." "Couldn't sleep." He leaned against the counter beside her, close enough that she could smell his soap. Something cedar and clean that she'd accidentally bought for herself once, then returned because it felt too intimate, too much like bringing him into her shower. The Riverside project. They want the full restoration proposal by Friday. The loft stretched around them, all exposed brick and reclaimed wood, the kind of space neither could afford alone. Morning sounds filled the comfortable silence. The coffee maker's last gurgles, rain starting against the windows, the distant rumble of Seattle traffic waking up. Elara's easel claimed the western corner, where afternoon light spilled longest, currently hosting a half-finished illustration for a children's book. A fox in a garden, caught mid-dance. Julian's drafting table dominated the eastern wall, buried under architectural drawings and historical photographs of buildings that had stood for 100 years and needed his careful hands to stand for 100 more. Their lives overlapped in the middle, the kitchen island scattered with both sketchbooks and blueprints, the sofa where they'd watched 1,000 movies, the bathroom they shared with an efficiency that would make actual couples jealous. "I'll stay quiet today," Elara promised, already mentally mapping out where she could work without disturbing him. Thursday meant he'd be on calls with contractors, his voice carrying through the space in that professional tone he used with clients, so different from the soft, easy way he talked to her. Julian smiled into his coffee, the expression transforming his face from sleepy to something brighter. "You're never quiet. You hum when you paint." "I do not." "Vivaldi, the Spring Concerto. You've been humming it for 3 years." He pushed off the counter, heading toward his workspace, coffee in hand. His t-shirt was rumpled from sleep, his dark hair sticking up on one side. Elara had learned not to tell him about the hair. Last time she tried to fix it, her fingers in those soft strands, his eyes had met hers with an intensity that made her drop her hand and retreat. "Don't stop. It helps me think." She watched him go, the morning light catching in his dark hair, now outlining his broad shoulders as he settled at his drafting table. Somewhere in the back of her mind, a small voice whispered that this easy intimacy, this knowing each other's coffee preferences and humming habits, and the exact way he looked first thing in the morning, wasn't quite normal for roommates. But Elara had spent 3 years teaching herself to ignore that voice. She was an expert at it now. Had to be. The envelope arrived at noon, slid under their door like a knife. "What's this?" Julian picked it up, frowning at the return address. "Halloway Property Management?" Elara felt her stomach drop. "The building sold last month, remember?" She abandoned her painting, crossing to read over his shoulder. New owners said they'd honor all existing leases. Julian tore it open. His face went white. What? What does it say? He read aloud, his voice flat. Dear tenants, as part of our family building initiative, this property will prioritize married couples and young families. Current leaseholders must provide proof of marriage or registered domestic partnership within 30 days, or vacate the premises. This policy ensures a stable, family-oriented community that... He stopped. It goes on like that. They can't do that. Elara snatched the letter, scanning it desperately. Can they do that? Apparently. Julian's jaw tightened. He moved to the window, staring out at the Seattle skyline. Rain had started, drops racing each other down the glass. New ownership. They can set their own tenant policies within legal limits. Married couples aren't a protected class they're discriminating against. The words hung between them. 30 days. Elara looked around their home, her canvases stacked against the brick, Julian's architectural models on every available surface. 3 years of their lives woven together in coffee stains and paint splatters and comfortable silence. We'll find something else, she said, not believing it. Julian didn't turn around. Yeah, sure. But they both knew. His expression matched hers, barely contained horror mixed with the desperate realization that this might actually be the best they could afford. We'll think about it, Julian said diplomatically, already edging toward the door. Outside, rain soaked through Elara's jacket within seconds as they walked back to his car. Seattle had decided to live up to its reputation today, the sky gray and endless above them. That was, she started. Horrifying? Julian opened her door, shielding her from the worst of the rain with his body. Depressing? A sign we should just give up and move back in with our parents? All of the above. She slid into the passenger seat, shivering. Did you see the bathtub? It was in the kitchen. I saw. He closed her door, jogging around to the driver's side. Once inside, he turned the heat up full blast, his hands red from cold. Next viewing is in 20 minutes. Capitol Hill. Supposed to have good light. The second place was worse. A basement apartment where mold crept up the walls in artistic patterns that would have been beautiful if they weren't toxic. The third had a landlord who kept staring at Elara in a way that made Julian's jaw tighten and his hand find her elbow, steering her toward the exit before she'd even finished the tour. The fourth was perfect. Hardwood floors, tall windows, enough space for both their work, and $3,000 over their combined budget. Maybe if we both took on extra clients, Elara suggested weakly, standing in the empty living room that could have been theirs. Julian was already pulling up their budget on his phone, his face grim. We'd need to double our income, each, and we're already working 60-hour weeks. By evening, they sat in Julian's car outside their loft, engine running for heat, neither ready to go inside yet. The building's warm windows glowed above them, 4 floors up where their life together waited, the life they were about to lose. Other tenants walked past, umbrellas bright against the gray, heading home to spaces they took for granted. I need this space. Julian's hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. The Riverside Project. It's the biggest commission I've ever had. Historical restoration of the old waterfront district. If I pull this off, I can actually build my firm, hire employees, maybe stop eating ramen 3 nights a week. But I need room to work, need the light for the technical drawings, need to be able to spread out the historical photos and see them all at once. His voice cracked slightly. I need the space where I built everything. I know. Elara touched his arm. Through the jacket, she could feel tension coiled in his muscles, tight as wire. We'll figure something out. But she was thinking about her own deadlines, her own clients who'd found her because of her distinctive style that required that specific Western light, warm and golden. She was thinking about the commission she just landed with a major publisher, the biggest of her career, that required her to produce 30 illustrations by spring. Moving home to her mother's basement in Portland wasn't an option. Not after fighting so hard for independence, for proving she could make art into a living. Not after building a life that was finally hers. Julian's phone buzzed against the console. He glanced at it, then laughed. A sharp, bitter sound that hurt to hear. The landlord from apartment number 2, the Mold Palace, wants to know if we're interested. Says he can go down to $2,800 a month. That's still more than we pay now. By $1,000 each. He tossed the phone onto the dash. This is impossible. We're going to end up in one of those buildings where you can hear your neighbors breathing through the walls, working day jobs we hate to afford rent on places that'll kill our careers. They sat in silence, watching rain blur the windshield, turning the city into watercolor. Somewhere in the building above, their home waited. Their separate rooms, their shared spaces, their comfortable life that was about to end in 30 days. 29 now. Elara found herself counting them like a countdown to disaster. We could get married, Julian said it while staring at his drafting table, pencil frozen mid-sketch. Elara looked up from her laptop where she'd been searching rental listings with increasingly desperate search terms. What? Married. He still wasn't looking at her. The letter says married couples. We could just tell them we're married. Elara's heart did something complicated in her chest. That's fraud. Is it? Now he turned and she saw he was actually considering this. We've lived together for 3 years. Common law marriage is legal in some states. Not Washington. But Mrs. Halloway doesn't know that. He abandoned his desk, pacing their shared space. Think about it. We pay our rent on time. We're quiet. We're perfect tenants. They're just trying to drive out singles to jack up the rent for families. It's legal, but it's predatory. Elara closed her laptop. You want to lie to our landlord? I want to keep my home. He stopped pacing, meeting her eyes. I want you to keep your home. And yeah, maybe I want to not let some corporate property management company push us around just because we're not sleeping together. The last words landed between them with unexpected weight. Not sleeping together, as if that was the only difference between what they had and what married couples had. As if they didn't already share everything else, space and time and comfortable silence, and the way he knew she took her coffee, and she knew he couldn't sleep before big presentations. It would never work, Elara said, but her mind was already turning over the possibilities. They'd want proof, documentation. Photoshop. Julian was warming to the idea now. She could see it in his face. Marriage certificates are just paper. We scan one, change the names, print it out, keep it simple. What if they check? Why would they check? They're a property management company, not the FBI. He sat on the sofa, pulling his laptop toward him. Look, I know it sounds crazy, but we're both about to lose everything we built here. Our careers, our space, our... He stopped. Our what? Elara wondered. Our friendship? Our life together? Let me think about it, she said, but she was already thinking. Yes. Yes, this is insane. Yes, I'll do it. The wire ring caught the lamplight as Julian twisted it between his fingers. Where did you even get this? Elara asked. Sculpture wire from your supply drawer. Hope you don't mind. He'd shaped it into something almost elegant. A simple band with a tiny loop at the top, like the promise of a diamond that would never come. Figured we needed props. They sat on the floor of their living room, laptop open between them, editing a marriage certificate template Julian had found online. Outside, rain drummed steadily against the windows. Inside felt too warm, too close. Change the date, Elara suggested, leaning over to point at the screen, their shoulders pressed together. Make it 2 years ago. More believable than suddenly getting married right after the letter. Good thinking. Julian's fingers flew across the keyboard. And we should use the county clerk's office in Portland, since you're from there originally? Perfect. She watched him work, watched him bite his lower lip in concentration the way he always did. watched him build their fake marriage with the same careful attention he gave to architectural drawings. When the printer hummed to life, they both stared at it like it might explode. The document looked real, too real. Elara ran her finger over the embossed seal Julian had somehow managed to fake. "This is actually illegal, isn't it?" "Probably." He picked up the wire ring again. "You want to back out?" She should. This was crazy. This was fraud. This was going to blow up in their faces. "Give me the ring," she said instead. Julian's hand trembled slightly as he reached for hers. The wire was cool against her skin, surprisingly smooth. He slid it onto her left ring finger with unexpected gentleness, and for just a moment, one brief, dangerous moment, Elara let herself imagine this was real. "Your turn." She picked up the second ring he'd made, thicker, more masculine, took his hand. His fingers were warm, familiar from 1,000 casual touches, but this felt different, deliberate. She pushed the wire over his knuckle, settled it at the base of his finger. "I now pronounce us frauds," Julian said, trying for humor, but neither of them laughed. They sat there on the floor of their loft, holding hands, wearing wire rings, while rain whispered against the windows and the fake marriage certificate dried on the desk behind them. "The photos need to look natural." Elara stood in what had been Julian's room, studying it with a painter's eye for composition. Two single beds pushed together like an awkward confession. His books mixed with hers on the nightstand. Her poetry collections nestled against his architecture theory texts. Their clothes sharing closet space in a way that should feel invasive, but somehow didn't. "This looks like a crime scene," Julian observed from the doorway, shoulder against the frame. "Or a really bad sitcom about roommates who can't afford furniture. It looks like we moved in together gradually and never bothered to buy a proper bed." She grabbed one of his architectural drawings from the wall, a beautiful sketch of a Victorian facade, and relocated it to make room for something more personal. "We need more couple things. Photos of us together." "We don't have couple photos. We have 3 years of photos." Elara pulled out her phone, scrolling through her camera roll. 3 years of their life together, documented in casual snapshots she'd taken without thinking. "Look, here's us at Pike Place Market. Here's New Year's Eve at that rooftop party. Here's that weekend we went to Vancouver and got caught in that rainstorm." Julian came to look over her shoulder, his chest warm against her back. She could feel his breath on her neck as he leaned in, feel the shift in his breathing when he saw the photos. "Those are friend photos. So we crop them closer, make them look intimate." She selected one, them at a coffee shop in Fremont, caught mid-laugh about something long forgotten. In the photo, her head tilted toward his, her eyes crinkled with genuine joy. His hand rested near hers on the table, close enough that their knuckles almost touched. The morning light through the cafe window had painted them both golden. "See? Crop it right here, and it looks like a date, like we're the only two people in the world. You're good at this." Something in his voice made her look up. His expression was strange, caught between admiration and something else she couldn't name, something that made her stomach flip. "I'm an illustrator. Framing is literally my job." She busied herself with the phone to avoid meeting his eyes. "Composition, negative space, emotional center. It's all the same whether I'm drawing it or photographing it." They spent the afternoon staging their life, turning 3 years of platonic friendship into the visual language of romance. Moving Elara's clothes into Julian's closet, their garments hanging side by side, her soft dresses against his button-downs, her paint-stained jeans next to his work khakis. Hanging the cropped photos on the walls in cheap frames from Target, arranging them like a timeline of love. Buying a set of matching mugs they labeled his and hers in a fit of ironic commitment, though Elara felt a small ache when she wrote the words. Putting her toothbrush in the holder next to his in the bathroom they'd already been sharing for years, though now it meant something different. Now it meant marriage. Julian found an old Valentine's Day card in a drugstore, wrote, "To my favorite roommate," inside, and placed it on her nightstand. Elara added one of her small paintings to his side, a tiny watercolor of the Seattle skyline at sunset, painted from memory of the view from their windows. They scattered these small intimacies throughout the space like seeds, hoping they grow into something believable. "We need to move my bed out," Elara said, standing in her soon-to-be studio doorway. The room looked bare without furniture, just her easel and canvases stacked against exposed brick. "Make this look like a dedicated workspace instead of a bedroom. Where will you actually sleep? The sofa?" She shrugged, trying to sound casual about spending the next however many months on their lumpy couch. "It's temporary. Once they verify we're married, we can relax, go back to normal." But Julian was frowning, that small crease appearing between his eyebrows that meant he was worrying. "The sofa is lumpy. You'll destroy your back. I've watched you fall asleep there during movies. You always wake up with a crick in your neck." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she recognized as stress. "Look, the bed is big enough for 2 adults. We can share it like mature people. Put a pillow wall between us or something, like in those old movies." The thought of sleeping next to Julian, actually sleeping next to him night after night, in the dark and quiet, sent Elara's heart rate into dangerous territory. "That's not necessary." "It is if Mrs. Halloway does a surprise inspection." He met her eyes, his gaze steady and serious. "We need to commit to this, Elle, all the way. Otherwise it falls apart. Otherwise we lose everything." He was right. She hated that he was right. Hated more that part of her wasn't hating the idea at all. "Fine," she said, "but I'm taking the left side. And I'm a blanket hog." "I know," Julian said softly, his voice doing something complicated in his chest. "I've done your laundry for 3 years. I've seen the tangled mess you make of your sheets every week." Something about the domesticity of that observation, the intimacy of him knowing her sleeping habits through stolen glances and laundry days, of him paying attention to details she didn't know he noticed, made Elara's chest tight, made her wonder what else he'd noticed, what else he knew about her that she'd never told him. Mrs. Halloway arrived unannounced at 7 p.m. Just wanted to welcome the married residents personally. She stood in their doorway, sharp eyes already scanning past them into the loft. "May I come in?" Of course. Julian's hand found Elara's waist, pulling her against his side. The touch sent electricity up her spine. "We were just making dinner. Would you like some wine?" Smooth. Elara let herself lean into him, playing the role. "We're so glad the new management is focusing on community, aren't we, honey?" The endearment felt foreign in her mouth. Julian's fingers tightened on her hip. Mrs. Halloway stepped inside, her gaze cataloging everything. The shared workspace, the photos on the walls, the matching mugs on the drying rack. "How long have you two been married?" 2 years this August. Julian guided Elara toward the kitchen, his hand never leaving her waist. "We actually lived here as roommates first, fell in love under this roof." He was good at this. Too good. Elara tried not to think about how natural his touch felt, how right it seemed to move through their space together like this. "That's lovely." Mrs. Halloway accepted the wineglass Julian offered. "And you both work from home?" "I'm an architect," Julian explained, specializing in historical restoration. Elara's an illustrator. The natural light here is essential for both our careers." "We're so grateful to stay," Elara added, and meant it. She pulled away from Julian, instantly missing his warmth, to grab the fake marriage certificate from the desk. "Here's our documentation, if you need it." Mrs. Halloway barely glanced at it. "That's fine, dear. I can see you're legitimate." Her smile was knowing. "You can always tell the real couples. The way they move around each other, the little touches." Elara's face burned. Beside her, Julian had gone very still. "Well," Mrs. Halloway set down her wineglass, "I'll let you get back to your dinner. Oh, one more thing. We're having a resident mixer next Saturday. 6 p.m. in the courtyard. I expect all our couples to attend. It's a wonderful chance to build community. We'll be there, Julian promised. The door closed behind her. Silence flooded the loft. Elara stepped away from Julian, suddenly needing distance. That was close. We passed. But he didn't sound relieved. He sounded strained. She bought it completely. The little touches, Elara repeated, trying for humor. Guess we're good actors. Julian didn't answer. He moved to the windows, staring out at the rain-dark city. The wire ring on his finger caught the light. Julian? We have to keep this up through Saturday, he said quietly, in front of all the neighbors. Can you do that? Could she pretend to be in love with her best friend in front of a crowd? Could she touch him and smile at him and play the devoted wife while her actual feelings twisted into something she couldn't name? Yes, Elara lied. I can do that. Saturday arrived dressed in rare Seattle sunshine. I can't do this. Elara stood in front of their shared closet, staring at her clothes like they'd betrayed her. What does a fake wife wear to a community mixer? Something you'd normally wear? Julian emerged from the bathroom, and Elara's breath caught. He'd dressed up, dark jeans, a button-down that brought out his eyes. He looked like someone's husband, someone's actual, real husband. You're overthinking this. I'm really not. She grabbed a sundress at random, something floral and soft that she hadn't worn since her sister's wedding. We have to convince an entire building that we're in love. That's not overthinking. That's appropriate concern. Julian came to stand behind her. In the mirror, they looked like a couple. Her in the dress, him in his careful clothes, the matching wire rings on their fingers. Hey, his hands settled on her shoulders, gentle. We've been friends for 3 years. We know each other better than most married couples. Just be yourself. Be us. That's all we need. But that was the problem, wasn't it? Being themselves, being the easy, comfortable, platonic them, had nearly blown their cover with Mrs. Halloway. The landlord had seen through to something Elara herself was afraid to examine. What if I mess this up? She whispered. You won't. His reflection met hers. You're the most naturally affectionate person I know. Just pretend the neighbors are clients you're trying to charm. Clients I'm supposed to be married to. Minor detail. He squeezed her shoulders once, then let go, and Elara immediately missed the contact. Come on, let's go be the perfect couple. The courtyard had been transformed with string lights and tables laden with food. 20 or so residents mingled, most of them obviously paired off. Elara felt Julian's hand find the small of her back as they entered, guiding her through the crowd with a possessiveness that was definitely for show. Definitely. There they are. Mrs. Halloway descended with 2 other women in tow. Elara and Julian, the artists on the 4th floor. Isn't their loft absolutely charming? The next hour blurred into introductions and small talk. Julian kept touching her, a hand on her hip, fingers brushing her arm, once tucking a strand of hair behind her ear with such tenderness that Elara forgot to breathe. Each touch felt like a small detonation in her chest. You 2 are adorable, one of the wives gushed. How did you know he was the one? Elara's mind went blank. Julian's hand tightened on her waist. She hummed, he said simply. That first week she moved in, I heard her humming while she painted. Vivaldi. And I just knew this was someone I wanted to hear every morning for the rest of my life. The women melted. Elara's heart stopped, because that wasn't acting. That was the truth, wrapped in the disguise of their lie. The wire ring glinted in the darkness. Elara lay on her side of the bed, her side now, after 1 week of this arrangement, staring at Julian's sleeping back. The pillow wall they'd built the first night had gradually shrunk. Tonight it was just 1 pillow between them, and even that felt like too much. She couldn't stop thinking about the mixer, about Julian's hand at the small of her back, sure and possessive, about the way he'd told that story. She hummed, like it meant something. About the moment at the end of the night when they'd walked home through the warm darkness, and he'd reach for her hand without thinking, only to freeze when he realized, only to not let go anyway. "I can hear you thinking," Julian's voice, rough with sleep. "Sorry, didn't mean to wake you." He rolled over and suddenly they were face to face across the pillow wall. In the dim light from the window, his eyes were dark, unreadable. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Too wired from tonight, I guess." She tucked her hands under her cheek. "We pulled it off." "Yeah," but he didn't sound happy about it. "Everyone believed us. Your story about the humming, that was good, quick thinking." "It wasn't thinking." The words came out quiet. "It was just true." Elara's heart hammered. "Julian, go to sleep, El." He closed his eyes, ending the moment. "Tomorrow we can go back to normal. Tonight was just performance." But as she lay there in the darkness, feeling his warmth across the pillow barrier, listening to his breathing slow and even out, Elara knew. Nothing about this was performance. Nothing about this was normal. And she had no idea how they were supposed to go back. The wire ring weighed heavy on her finger. Outside, rain began again, tapping against the windows like a question she couldn't answer. "We need to practice." Julian stood in the middle of their loft, looking uncomfortable in a way that had nothing to do with the clothes. Sunday morning light poured through the windows, making everything feel too bright, too exposed. "Practice what?" Elara set down her coffee, though her hands needed something to hold. "Being married." He gestured vaguely between them. "Mrs. Halloway bought it because we got lucky. But the mixer next Saturday, that's different. That's sustained performance in front of 20 people who'll be watching us all night." Elara's stomach flipped. "You want to rehearse being in love?" "I want us to survive the mixer without blowing our cover." He crossed to her, deliberate, and she forced herself not to step back. "Simple things, like how married people hold hands." He reached for her hand. She gave it to him, feeling the wire ring pressed between their palms as his fingers laced through hers. His hand was warm, slightly callous from drafting work, familiar from 1,000 casual touches that had never meant anything. Except this meant something. This meant everything. "See?" His voice was too controlled. "Natural. Now try it." They stood there, holding hands in their living room like awkward teenagers. Elara focused on breathing normally, on not thinking about how his thumb had started tracing absent circles on her wrist, on whether he could feel her pulse hammering under his touch. "What else?" she managed. "Casual touches." Julian's free hand found her waist, settling there with terrifying certainty. "Married couples do this. Stand close, touch without thinking. We need it to look automatic." Automatic, right, except there was nothing automatic about the heat spreading from where his hand rested on her hip. Nothing casual about the way her body wanted to lean into him. "Your turn," he said. "Touch me." Elara's brain short-circuited. "What?" "Touch me. Casual affection, like a wife would." She reached up, hesitant, and straightened his collar, a gesture she'd done 100 times before when he'd come home from client meetings. But now her fingers lingered on the fabric, her knuckles brushing his neck. His pulse jumped under her touch. "Good," he said quietly. "That's good. Natural." But his eyes said nothing about this was natural. His eyes said he was barely holding it together too. They spent an hour practicing intimacy like it was choreography. Julian taught her how married couples looked at each other, held gazes a beat too long, smiled with private meaning. Elara showed him how to tuck her hair behind her ear like it meant something more than utility. They learned the weight of each other, how to stand together like they'd been doing it for years instead of days. By the end, Elara felt drunk on proximity, on Julian's hands on her waist, his breath on her neck when he leaned in to murmur something, the solid warmth of him when they'd practiced slow dancing to imaginary music. "I think we're ready," Julian said, stepping back. Cool air rushed into the space between them. Elara wanted to pull him back. Yeah, ready. Elara sat at her easel Tuesday afternoon, supposedly working on the fox illustration. Instead, her brush moved across a fresh canvas with a will of its own. Dark hair, strong jawline, eyes that held something between sadness and hope. Julian. She'd painted him without meaning to. Again. This was the third time this week. The other attempts were hidden in her closet, faced to the wall like secrets. In this version, he stood at their window, silhouetted against Seattle gray. His reflection ghosted in the glass. Two versions of him, solid and translucent, real and imagined. The painting asked a question she couldn't answer. Which version was true? Working hard? Elara jumped, nearly knocking over her water jar. Julian stood behind her, holding two mugs of tea. His eyes went to the canvas, to his own face rendered in her careful brushstrokes. It's just practice, she said too quickly. Figure study. Portraits are good for keeping skills sharp. I'm flattered. But something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or pleasure, or something deeper she couldn't name. Though you made me look more heroic than I am. I painted what I see. The words hung between them, heavier than she'd meant. Julian set down the tea mugs with careful precision, like he was buying time to think. "Elle." "The light was right," she interrupted. "You were standing there this morning, and the way it hit your face, it was just interesting, compositionally, from an artistic perspective." "Right." He handed her the tea, their fingers brushing. Artistic perspective. But he looked at the painting again before leaving, and Elara saw him touch his own face, as if checking whether he was really the person she'd painted, as if wondering whether her brushstrokes had captured something true or something wished for. After he left, she stared at the canvas, at Julian's painted eyes, which somehow held more honesty than she could speak aloud. The mixer came dressed in twilight and string lights. "Ready?" Julian asked at their apartment door, his hand finding hers automatically now. 4 days of practice had made the gesture muscle memory. "Ready," Elara lied. The courtyard hummed with conversation and laughter. Couples everywhere, woven together in the casual intimacy of long commitment. Mrs. Halloway spotted them immediately, bearing down with a smile that promised social obligation. "There you are. Come meet the Johnsons from 2B, married 40 years next month." The next hour blurred. Julian's hand never left her, on her back, her hip, once playing with a strand of her hair while he told some story about a client. Every touch a small detonation. Every casual gesture felt like the most deliberate thing in the world. "Speech! Speech!" someone called out. Mrs. Halloway was pushing the Johnsons toward the center of the courtyard, where someone had set up a small platform. The elderly couple beamed at each other. 40 years of knowing every secret, every wound, every joy. Mr. Johnson took his wife's hand. "The secret to marriage," he said, voice carrying across the courtyard, "is never stopping the courtship, never stopping the small gestures that say, 'I choose you.' Like this." He kissed his wife, soft, sweet, 40 years deep. The crowd applauded. Mrs. Halloway's eyes were bright. "See, that's what real love looks like." And then, somehow, the attention shifted. People were looking at them, at Elara and Julian, the newest couple barely 2 years, married. "Your turn," someone called out. "Show us young love." Elara's heart stopped. Beside her, Julian had gone very still. "We're not really the public display type," Elara started. "Oh, come on," Mrs. Halloway laughed. "Don't be shy. Just a little kiss. Show us that newlywed magic." The crowd took up the chant. Kiss, kiss, kiss. Playful, insistent, impossible to refuse without looking suspicious. Julian turned to her. In his eyes, she saw the same panic she felt, the same trapped awareness. They could refuse, blow their cover, lose everything, or they could kiss. His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. A question in the gesture, asking permission. She gave the smallest nod. Julian leaned in. The world contracted to the point where their breaths mingled, where she could count his eyelashes, where time moved like honey. His lips touched hers, soft, tentative, achingly gentle. For a heartbeat, it was just the performance, just the lie. Then something shifted. Julian's hand slid into her hair, his other arm pulling her closer. Elara's hands found his chest, feeling his heart hammer against her palm. The kiss deepened, became real, became the most honest thing either of them had done in weeks. She forgot about the crowd, forgot about the performance, forgot everything except the taste of him, the feel of him, the way her entire body was singing yes, yes, finally, yes. When they broke apart, the crowd was cheering. Julian's eyes were dark, stunned, his breathing ragged. "That's love," Mrs. Halloway announced, satisfied. "That's what we want in this building." Elara couldn't look away from Julian, couldn't process what had just happened, couldn't figure out where the performance ended and the truth began. The wire ring bit into Elara's finger. They sat in Julian's car in the building's garage, engine off, neither moving to go upstairs. The kiss hung between them like smoke, like a question neither dared ask. "That was," Julian started, then stopped. "Convincing," Elara supplied. Her lips still tingled. "Very convincing." "Yeah." His hands gripped the steering wheel, though the car was parked. "Sorry if I got carried away. I just wanted it to look real." "Real." Elara's chest ached. "You're a good actor." "So are you." They sat in silence. Around them, concrete pillars cast long shadows. Somewhere above, their loft waited, the bed they now shared, the life they'd built from lies and wire rings and kisses that felt too much like truth. "We should go up," Julian said, not moving. "Yeah." Neither of them moved. Elara stared at her hands, at the fake ring that had started to feel permanent. She thought about the painting hidden in her closet, about the way Julian's heart had raced under her palm during the kiss, about how she'd completely forgotten they had an audience. "Julian, we should just go to sleep," he cut her off, opening his door with sudden energy. "Big week ahead, lots of work." He was out of the car before she could respond, already walking toward the elevator like something was chasing him. Elara followed slowly, her thoughts a tangled mess. In the elevator, they stood at opposite walls. The silence was wrong, not their comfortable quiet, but something strained and careful. When the doors opened on their floor, Julian practically fled down the hallway. Inside the loft, he went straight to the bathroom. Elara heard the shower turn on, heard him stay there for a long time. She changed for bed mechanically, pulling on an old t-shirt, taking down her hair. When Julian emerged, smelling like soap, skin damp, carefully not meeting her eyes, she took her turn in the bathroom, scrubbing her face like she could wash away the memory of his mouth on hers. The bed felt too big and too small at once. Julian lay on his side, facing away, his breathing too controlled to be sleep. Elara stared at the ceiling, counting the exposed beams she'd counted 1,000 nights before. "Good night," Julian said quietly. "Night." The pillow wall between them had never felt so vast, or so inadequate. Shit, 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 shit. Elara woke to Julian's voice, sharp with alarm. Wednesday morning, too early, the loft freezing cold. "What's wrong?" She sat up, pulling the blanket with her. "Heating's out, and the forecast says it's dropping to 32 tonight." Julian stood by the thermostat, phone in hand, already scrolling through emergency HVAC numbers. "The landlord's guy can't come until Friday." "Friday? That's 2 days away." "I know." He was already dialing. "I'm trying to find someone else." 3 hours and 6 phone calls later, the verdict was clear. Everyone was booked solid. A cold snap had hit Seattle, and every heating company in the city was overwhelmed. The earliest anyone could come was Thursday evening. Maybe. "We'll freeze," Elara said, watching her breath mist in the air. "Not necessarily." Julian was in problem-solving mode, pacing their space with that architectural mind working on the puzzle. The bedroom gets more passive heat from neighboring apartments. If we seal off the rest of the loft, pile on blankets, and share body heat, Elara finished, her stomach flipping. Yeah, he stopped pacing. Is that, would you be okay with that? Would she be okay sharing a bed with Julian for warmth? With lying close enough to feel every breath, every shift, every moment of awareness? After that kiss that still haunted her mouth? It's just practical, she heard herself say. Better than hypothermia. They spent the afternoon preparing. Julian taped plastic over the bedroom door to seal in what little heat they had. Elara piled every blanket they owned onto the bed. Comforters, quilts, the sleeping bag from Julian's camping gear. They looked ridiculous. They looked desperate. Night fell early, bringing cold that crept through the walls. Elara changed in the bathroom, layering socks and sweatpants and a hoodie over her pajamas. When she emerged, Julian was already in bed, buried under the mountain of blankets. "Come here," he said, lifting the covers. She climbed in beside him, and the cold made the choice easy. She pressed against his side, seeking warmth. His arm came around her automatically, pulling her closer. She felt him inhale sharply at the contact. "Sorry," she murmured. "My feet are cold." "It's fine," but his voice was tight. Yeah, this is fine." It wasn't fine. It was torture. Elara could feel every inch of him pressed against her, his chest solid against her back, his arm heavy across her waist, his breath warm on her neck. Could feel her body responding, relaxing into him like this was where it belonged. "Tell me about the Riverside project," she said desperately, needing to fill the silence with something safe. "Distract me from the cold." Julian's chest rumbled with quiet laughter. "You want to hear about historical architecture? I want to hear you talk." So he did, his voice low and warm in the darkness, describing the waterfront buildings he was restoring, the history he was preserving. His hands started tracing absent patterns on her arm through her hoodie, circles and lines, maybe floor plans, maybe nothing. She focused on his words, on the passion in his voice when he talked about saving something beautiful, about building something that would last. Slowly, the cold receded. Or maybe she just stopped noticing it. Stopped noticing anything except the steady beat of Julian's heart against her back, the safety of his arms, the way she fit against him like a key in a lock. "Elle?" His voice had gone soft, sleepy. I'm glad it's you," barely a whisper. "If I had to fake marry anyone, I'm glad it's you." Her heart cracked open. "Me too." His arm tightened around her just for a moment. Then his breathing evened out, deepened, and she knew he was asleep. Elara lay awake a long time, warm for the first time all day, trying not to think about how natural this felt, how right, how much she never wanted to move. Thursday morning arrived in pale winter light. Elara woke to warmth and confusion. It took her a moment to orient. She was on her stomach, face buried in the pillow, and Julian's arm was draped across her back. At some point during the night, they'd completely abandoned their sides of the bed. She was sprawled across the middle, and Julian had followed, his body curved around hers like parentheses. She should move, should wake him, should retreat to her side before this became even more complicated than it already was. Instead, she held very still, memorizing the weight of his arm, the sound of his breathing, the way his hand had somehow found hers under the pillow, their fingers loosely linked. Just 5 more minutes, she told herself. Just 5 minutes of pretending this was real. Julian stirred. His hand tightened on hers, his arm pulling her closer in unconscious reflex. Then awareness returned. She felt it in the sudden tension in his body, the way his breathing changed. But he didn't pull away. For a long moment, neither of them moved. "The heating guy's coming at 3, he said finally, his voice rough with sleep and something else. "Good. We won't have to do this again." "No." but neither of them moved. Julian's thumb had started tracing slow circles on her hand, and Elara could feel her heart beating so hard he must feel it too. "We should get up," he said. "Probably." His hand left hers. His arm slid away. Cool air rushed into the space between them as he rolled out of bed. Elara immediately missed his warmth, missed the cocoon they'd built in the night. She sat up, pushing hair out of her face. Julian stood by the window, his back to her, his shoulders tense. "Coffee?" he offered without turning. "Yeah, thanks." They moved through their morning like strangers, carefully not touching, carefully not mentioning the night. But Elara kept catching him watching her with an expression she couldn't read, kept finding herself watching him back, wondering if he'd slept as little as she had, wondering if he'd also been memorizing the moment, storing it away for later when they went back to being just roommates, just friends, just liars. The woman appeared at Julian's drafting table on Friday afternoon. Elara looked up from her painting to find a stunning redhead leaning over Julian's work, her hand on his shoulder, her laugh too bright in their quiet space. "Jules! I was just in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by." Jules. Nobody called him Jules. Elara felt something hot and ugly twist in her chest. "Madison." Julian sounded surprised, but not unhappy. "It's been what, a year?" "Since that conference in Portland, yeah." The woman, Madison, finally glanced at Elara. "Oh, sorry, didn't realize you had company." "This is Elara, my—" Julian's eyes found hers across the room. "My wife." The words should have sounded natural after 2 weeks of practice. Instead, they sounded like a confession. "Wife?" Madison's perfect eyebrows shot up. "Jules, you dark horse. Last time we talked, you were allergically single." "Things change." Julian's hand went to his wire ring, twisting it. Madison's another architect. We met at a preservation conference." Elara forced a smile, setting down her paintbrush. "Nice to meet you." But she was studying Madison, her expensive blazer, her confident stance, the way she touched Julian like she had every right to, the way Julian was smiling at her, relaxed in a way he hadn't been since the kiss. "I'm actually heading up a restoration project in Belltown," Madison said, pulling out her phone. "Could use someone with your historical expertise, Jules. We should grab coffee, catch up, talk details." Coffee, catch up. Elara wanted to throw her paint water. "That sounds great." Julian was already pulling up his calendar. "Tuesday work for you?" "Perfect. I'll text you the place." Madison squeezed his shoulder again, a familiar gesture that made Elara's teeth clench. "Great to see you, and congrats on the marriage. You're a lucky man." She left in a cloud of expensive perfume. The loft felt too quiet in her wake. "Old friend?" Elara asked, trying to sound casual. "Colleague." Julian was still looking at the door Madison had disappeared through. "She's brilliant. Won a preservation award last year for her work on the Smith Tower." Brilliant, beautiful, successful, everything Elara wasn't. "You should definitely meet with her," she said, each word careful. "Sounds like a good opportunity." Julian finally looked at her. "You okay?" "Why wouldn't I be? You're doing that thing where you paint really aggressively when something's bothering you." Elara looked down. She'd somehow picked up her brush again and was attacking the canvas with short, angry strokes. "I'm fine." "I'm fine, Julian." She set the brush down with exaggerated care. "Go have coffee with Madison. Talk about preservation. It's great." She walked to the bathroom before he could respond, locking herself in. Stared at her reflection, paint-stained, messy-haired, wearing an old t-shirt with holes. Not the kind of woman who wore designer blazers and won awards. Not the kind of woman Julian would choose if he weren't stuck with her. The wire ring on her finger felt suddenly heavy, a reminder that this was all fake, that she had no right to the jealousy burning in her chest, that Madison could touch Julian's shoulder and make him smile, while Elara could only touch him when they were performing. When she came out, Julian was on the phone with a client. He glanced at her, concern in his eyes, but she busied herself with cleaning brushes, avoiding, retreating. That night they lay in bed with the pillow wall rebuilt between them. The heating was fixed. They didn't need to share warmth anymore. Somehow, that made everything worse. Monday morning, Julian didn't get up. Elara woke to find him still in bed, his face flushed, his breathing rough. She touched his forehead, burning. "Julian?" "I'm fine," but his voice was weak, scraped raw, and he winced when he tried to sit up. "Just need coffee." "You need medicine and rest." She was already up, padding to the bathroom in bare feet, digging through their medicine cabinet for the thermometer. Her hands shook slightly. She'd never seen him like this. Always healthy, always moving, always steady. "How long have you felt like this?" "Since yesterday. Thought it was just tired." He coughed, the sound rattling in his chest. "Had the Riverside deadline, couldn't stop working." Of course he couldn't. Of course he'd pushed himself past the breaking point for a project that meant everything to him. The thermometer beeped. 102.4. Ilara's chest tightened with worry that felt too big for a fake wife to have. "I'm calling your doctor." "Don't be dramatic. It's just a cold." But even as he said it, he was shivering under the covers, his skin gray pale underneath the fever flush. "It's the flu, and you're going to the doctor whether you like it or not." She grabbed her phone, already looking up urgent care locations, mentally cataloging what they'd need. Insurance card, water bottle, something warm for him to wear. The argument was brief. Julian was too weak to really fight, and some part of him, the part that usually carried everything alone, seemed relieved to let her take over. Elara got him dressed like he was a child, patient and gentle, helping him into warm layers, tying his shoes when he got too dizzy bending over. Drove him to urgent care with one hand on his knee, steady and sure. Sat with him through the exam, holding his hand while the doctor pressed cold instruments to his chest, listening to his labored breathing. Flu, confirmed, plus a secondary infection already starting in his chest. Antibiotics, rest, fluids, fever reducers. The doctor's eyes were kind but serious when she looked at Elara. "He needs to be monitored. Fever this high, if it doesn't come down in 24 hours, bring him back." Back home, she settled Julian in bed with water and medicine and strict instructions not to move. He fell asleep almost immediately, his face still too pale, his breathing concerning. She sat beside the bed watching him sleep, one hand on his wrist, feeling his pulse. Too fast, too thready. Pushed his hair back from his forehead, checking for fever. His hand found hers in sleep, holding on like an anchor, like she was the only solid thing in the world. "Don't scare me like that," she whispered, and meant it more than she should. More than a fake wife had any right to. She spent the day taking care of him like it was her job, her purpose, her only priority. Brought him soup he barely ate, just a few sips before exhaustion pulled him under again. Monitored his temperature every few hours, writing it down with clinical precision. 102.1, 101.8, 102.3. Changed the cool cloth on his forehead when it got too warm. Canceled his client meetings with efficient apologies and careful lies about family illness. Texted his mother, they'd exchanged numbers after that first call, with updates. Found his favorite college sweatshirt in the back of the closet and tucked it around him because she knew he found it comforting. At some point she realized this was what wives did. Real wives who loved their husbands and worried when they were sick and knew exactly which sweatshirt smelled like home. She realized she'd stopped pretending months ago, maybe years ago, maybe from the moment he'd first made her coffee without asking how she took it. That night, Julian woke delirious with fever. "El? I'm here." She was immediately at his side, checking his temperature again, 103.1, higher than before. Her hands were shaking as she reached for her phone. Should she call the doctor? The ER? "Can't lose the loft," he mumbled, his hand clutching hers with surprising strength for someone so weak. His eyes were too bright, unfocused. Can't lose you. You won't. She smoothed his hair back, her heart breaking into 1,000 pieces. I promise, sleep now. I'm not going anywhere. Love this place. Love our... His eyes closed, words trailing off into coughing. Our what? Our home? Our life? Our complicated, fake, beautiful arrangement? Love, he tried again, weaker. Love you. Elara sat frozen. He was delirious, fever talking. Didn't mean it, couldn't mean it. But he was asleep again, lost to fever dreams, and she was left wondering which words he'd meant and which he'd swallowed. Left wondering if the truth came out when defenses were down. She didn't leave his side all night, monitored his fever, brought him water when he woke, held his hand in the dark. By morning, the fever had finally broken. Julian woke clear-eyed and weak, but himself again. You stayed, he said, seeing her curled in the chair beside the bed, rumpled and exhausted. Of course I stayed. She moved to check his forehead. Cool now, finally. You scared me. Sorry. He caught her hand, held it. Thank you for taking care of me, for... He stopped, remembering maybe, or not remembering. You didn't have to do all that. Yes, I did. The words came out fiercer than she'd intended. You're important, essential, mine. You're my friend. That's what friends do. But his eyes held hers, and she knew he heard what she didn't say. Knew he was remembering his fever confession. Knew they were both pretending they didn't know. Happy anniversary. Elara looked up from where she was sketching to find Julian holding a small wrapped box. 2 weeks since the mixer. 2 weeks since the kiss that had changed everything. What? Our fake anniversary, he smiled slightly. According to our story, we got married 2 years ago this week. I figured, I don't know, Mrs. Halloway might ask if we did anything special. Right, the performance. Always the performance. Elara took the box with trembling hands. Inside was a leather bookmark, hand-tooled with a pattern of cherry blossoms. Simple. Perfect. Exactly what she would have wanted if this were real. Julian, this is... I know you keep losing your place in books, and I know you love cherry blossoms. He shrugged, suddenly awkward. There's a guy at Pike Place who makes these. I saw it and thought of you. I saw it and thought of you. Such a small phrase, such a devastating admission of attention paid, details remembered. I didn't get you anything, Elara said, her voice small. You take care of me when I'm sick. You make the coffee every morning, even though I'm supposed to be the morning person. You let me talk about architecture for hours without getting bored. His eyes held hers. Your gift enough. Something in her chest cracked open. Elara stood, crossed to her easel, and grabbed the painting she'd hidden there, the one of him at the window, caught between real and reflected. This, she said, holding it out, this is for you. Julian took it carefully, his expression unreadable as he studied his own painted face. This is what you see when you look at me? Yes. I look, he stopped, swallowed, sad, hopeful, like I'm waiting for something. That's what I see. Julian set the painting down with careful precision. When he looked at her again, his eyes were raw with something she couldn't name. We should go out, she interrupted, terrified of what he might say. Celebrate our fake anniversary in public. Make sure people see us. Keep up the act. The moment shattered. Julian's face closed off. Right, the act. Good thinking. But that night when Elara fell asleep, the leather bookmark was on her nightstand, and when she woke up, Julian's painting was hanging on the wall opposite their bed, where he could see it first thing every morning. The wine made everything worse. Friday night, pasta on the stove, music playing from Julian's phone, they'd fallen into their old routine without discussing it. Cooking together, moving around each other in the small kitchen with practiced ease, laughing about Julian's client who'd wanted him to make the Victorian but modern. That's not how historical preservation works, Elara said, pouring them both more wine. Maybe the third glass, maybe the fourth. She'd lost count. Right? Julian gestured with his wooden spoon, animated and beautiful in the warm kitchen light. You can't just slap some chrome on a 100-year-old building and call it modern. That's not... He turned and suddenly they were too close. Had been standing too close this whole time without noticing. Elara's back hit the counter, and Julian was right there, close enough that she could smell his soap, could count the gold flecks in his eyes. The music shifted to something slow, sensual. Elara felt heat that had nothing to do with the wine spreading through her chest. Sorry, Julian said, not moving. Didn't mean to crowd you. You're not. But she was breathing too fast, and he noticed. His eyes dropped to her mouth, then back up, and Elara saw hunger there. Real hunger, not performed for an audience. For a moment, one stretched out impossible moment, she thought he was going to kiss her. The pasta's burning, she whispered. Julian jerked back like she'd hit him, turned to the stove, cursing, rescuing dinner. The moment dissolved, but Elara could still feel the heat of him, could still see the want in his eyes. They ate in careful silence, the weight of what almost happened sitting between them like a third person at the table. Elara wasn't trying to eavesdrop. She'd just come back from the corner store and was unlocking their apartment door when she heard Julian's voice through the wood. No, Mom, it's not like that. She froze, key and lock. Yes, I'm married. Yes, I'm happy. A pause. Because I love her. That's why. Elara's hand trembled. She should open the door, should announce herself, should not be hearing this. What's she like? Julian's voice softened. She's everything. She's brilliant and kind and so damn talented, it hurts to look at her work sometimes. She makes me laugh. She knows when I need space and when I need company. She hums when she paints, and she's terrible at keeping plants alive, and she takes her coffee with too much sugar. But, his voice cracked, but she's the first thing I think about every morning and the last thing I think about before I sleep. So yeah, Mom, I'm happy. I'm so happy it terrifies me. Elara stood in the hallway, groceries hanging from her numb hands. He was talking to his mother, playing the role, lying to his family for their fake marriage. Except it hadn't sounded like lying. It had sounded like the truth. She waited another minute, heart hammering, then made a show of unlocking the door noisily. Julian appeared from the bedroom, phone in hand, his face carefully neutral. Hey, get everything? Yeah, she held up the bags. Milk and bread, the essentials. Great, but he was looking at her strangely. You okay? You look flushed. Just cold out there. Liar, her heart whispered. You're lying too. Julian couldn't do this anymore. 3 a.m., lying in the dark, feeling Elara's warmth on the other side of the pillow wall, listening to her breathe, remembering the way she'd looked at him in the kitchen, the way she'd frozen when he'd almost kissed her, the way she took care of him when he was sick like he was precious. He'd been in love with her for 2 years, maybe longer, maybe from that first morning when she'd padded out to the kitchen in his t-shirt that she'd borrowed, sleep-rumpled and beautiful, and started humming without realizing it. He'd built his life around her, around the small domesticity they'd created, around her laugh and her paint-stained fingers, and the way she listened when he talked about work. He'd told himself he was happy being her friend, her roommate, her safe person who would never cross that line. Then this fake marriage had crossed every line, had given him a taste of what it would be like to call her wife, to touch her freely, to kiss her in front of crowds, and wake up beside her and pretend for just a moment that she was his. And now he had to go back, had to return to just friends when he'd touched her waist and felt her heartbeat, and tasted her mouth and memorized the way she fit against him in sleep. He couldn't do it. Couldn't pretend he didn't love her when she was right there, so close, wearing that wire ring he'd made like it meant something. "Julian?" Her voice, soft in the darkness. "Are you awake?" "Yeah." A pause, then, "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "That call with your mom." She rolled over, and he felt the mattress shift. "What you said about being happy, about loving, about being happy, did you mean it?" His heart stopped. "You heard that?" "Some of it." The door was thin. Another pause. "I'm sorry, I should have announced myself." Julian stared at the ceiling, at the question hanging between them. He could lie, could laugh it off, could say, of course it was just for his mother's benefit, just keeping up the charade. Or he could tell the truth, could risk everything, could be brave for once in his life. "Yes," he said simply, "I meant it." Silence. Then the pillow wall between them started to move. Elara pushed the pillow aside. In the darkness, she could barely see Julian, but she felt him. The way his breathing had changed from sleep steady to awake aware. The tension in his body like a wire pulled taut. The weight of his confession hanging between them, heavy as rain. "How long?" Her voice was barely a whisper, afraid of the answer and desperate for it. "Does it matter?" Yes, because she needed to know, needed to understand how long he'd been carrying this alone, how long they'd both been lying to themselves. Julian was quiet for a long moment. She heard him swallow, heard the sheets rustle as he shifted. 2 years, maybe more. I don't know when it started. Just know that one day I looked at you. You were painting that fox, remember? The one for the children's book? You had paint in your hair and you were humming, and the afternoon light was making everything gold. And I looked at you and realized you were the person I wanted to tell everything to. That every good thing that happened, my first thought was, I can't wait to tell Elle that you were home." Ilara's eyes burned. She thought about that day, that painting, thought about how she'd caught Julian staring at her and he'd looked away so fast. Thought about how many moments like that there had been, how many times they'd almost touched and pulled back, how many years they'd wasted being careful. "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because you're my best friend. Because I didn't want to ruin what we had. Because I thought—" He laughed bitterly, the sound raw in the darkness. "I thought I could be content being just your roommate, just your friend, that loving you quietly was enough, that watching you date other people and pretending it didn't kill me was worth it if it meant I got to keep you in my life." "You watched me date other people?" Ilara's voice cracked. "Julian, I haven't dated anyone in 18 months, I know. I counted every day of that too, wondering if you'd stop because you'd finally noticed me, and then hating myself for hoping that your loneliness was about me." "It was about you." The confession burst out of her. "I stopped dating because no one was you. No one knew how I took my coffee, or understood why I needed the Western light, or listened to me talk about color theory for hours without glazing over. No one felt like home." She heard his breath catch, felt the shift in the air between them. "And then this whole fake marriage thing started," Julian continued, his voice breaking now. "And it's been torture, Elle. Touching you and kissing you and holding you at night when the heat went out, knowing it's all just pretend for you, knowing you're just acting while I'm—" His voice broke completely. "While I'm dying every time you smile at me like I'm your husband. Every time you let me touch you because we have an audience. Every time you pull away when we're alone." Elara was moving before she could think, closing the distance between them, her hands finding his face in the dark. Wet, she realized with a shock. He was crying. Julian was crying. "You idiot." "What?" She kissed him. Not like at the mixer, not performed, not careful, not for anyone but them. This was desperate and real, and 3 years of wanting poured into one moment. 3 years of almost touches and swallowed words and lonely nights on opposite sides of a pillow wall. Julian made a sound against her mouth. Surprise, relief, need, recognition. And then he was kissing her back, his hands in her hair, pulling her closer, closer, like he could merge them into one person, like he'd been starving and she was the first meal he'd seen in years. Not acting, Elara gasped when they broke apart for air. Never acting, not for a second. Not since the moment you made that stupid wire ring, and I realized what we were doing was going to break my heart because it wasn't real, and I wanted it to be real so badly I couldn't breathe. Elle, I've been in love with you for so long, I forgot what not loving you felt like. The words spilled out in a rush, desperate to be spoken, desperate to be heard. I paint you. Did you know that? I have a whole stack of paintings hidden in my closet, just you, over and over, because I couldn't stop looking at you. Because your face is the one my hands know how to draw without thinking. I dream about you. I've memorized the way you take your coffee, and the sound of your laugh, and the exact shade of your eyes when the morning light hits them, and how you bite your lower lip when you're concentrating. I've been going insane pretending this was fake, when it's the realest thing I've ever felt. Julian's thumb traced her cheekbone, catching the tear sliding down. His own face was wet too, and in the faint light from the window she could see his expression, wonder and relief, and love so fierce it took her breath away. Say it again. I love you. Again. His voice was wrecked, desperate. I love you, Julian, I love you. I love... He kissed her again, and this time neither of them held back. 3 years of careful distance shattered in an instant. They came together like a storm, like inevitability, like two people who'd been orbiting each other for so long they'd forgotten they were always meant to collide. Hands exploring, breath mingling, whispered confessions between kisses. I've wanted this for so long. You're so beautiful. I can't believe this is real. Don't stop, please don't stop. Julian pulled back just far enough to look at her, his eyes dark and bright and full of everything she'd been too afraid to hope for. Are you sure? Because if we do this, I can't go back to just friends. I can't unknow what you taste like. Can't unfeel what it's like to have you in my arms like this. I don't want to go back. Elara pulled him down to her hands finding the hem of his shirt, pulling it over his head with shaking fingers. I want this. You. Real. I want every morning and every night and every stupid domestic moment in between. I want to stop pretending we're just roommates when we're so much more than that. When we've always been more than that. Real, he repeated, like testing the word, like making a promise. Real. And then there were no more words. Just the two of them, finally honest, finally brave, finally admitting what had been true all along. His skin under her hands, warm and real. Her name on his lips like a prayer. The way they moved together like they'd been doing this for years, like their bodies knew something their hearts had been too afraid to admit. The wire ring on Elara's finger caught the faint light from the window as she ran her hands through Julian's hair, as he traced patterns on her skin, as they learned each other in the language of touch and breath and love, finally spoken aloud. Tomorrow they'd deal with consequences. Tomorrow they'd figure out what came next, how to tell Mrs. Halloway, whether they could keep the loft or would have to start over somewhere new. Tonight they were just two people who'd loved each other for years and finally stopped lying about it. Morning light, softer than before. Elara woke tangled in Julian and sheet, and happiness so complete it felt surreal. His arm was around her waist, his face buried in her neck, his breathing steady and peaceful. She held very still, memorizing this, the weight of him, the warmth, the rightness. Stop thinking so loud, he murmured against her skin. I can hear you. I'm just... She turned in his arms to face him. His eyes were already open, soft with sleep and something deeper. Making sure this is real. It's real. He kissed her forehead, then her nose, then her mouth, light, almost reverent. Unless we're having the same dream, which would be convenient. What if this changes everything? Good. His hand traced patterns on her bare shoulder. I want it to change everything. Want to stop pretending. Want to tell Mrs. Holloway the truth. Want to take you on an actual date where I can hold your hand because I want to, not because someone's watching. We might lose the loft. We'll find somewhere else. He pulled her closer. As long as I have you, I don't care where we live. Elara's chest felt too full. You're very romantic in the morning. You make me romantic. He kissed her again, deeper this time. You make me everything. They stayed in bed longer than necessary, learning each other all over again. Everything felt different now, permission granted, walls down, truth shining between them. When they finally got up, Julian made coffee while Elara toasted bread, and the familiar routine felt transformed by simple freedom. I'm telling my mom, Julian announced, pouring her coffee exactly how she liked it, that you're not actually my wife, but I'm in love with you anyway. And I'm telling Madison, Elara added, surprised by the venom in her own voice, to find her own architect to coffee with. Julian raised an eyebrow. You jealous? Violently. He grinned, pulling her against him. Good. Julian stood at the window with his phone, the same window Elara had painted him at. Sunday morning, warm and golden, the two of them still moving through their space with new awareness, finding excuses to touch. Hey, Mom. Elara looked up from her easel. Julian caught her eye, smiled, and she felt her heart flutter. Still not used to being allowed to want him. No, I'm calling because I need to tell you something. A pause. About Elara, about our marriage. She set down her brush, watching him twist the wire ring on his finger, their fake ring that had somehow become the most real thing she owned. The truth is, we weren't really married. Not at first. His voice was steady, honest. It's complicated. The building had this policy, and we needed to stay, so we pretended. We lied to everyone, including you, and I'm sorry. Elara could hear his mother's voice rising on the other end, sharp with surprise. I know it sounds insane, but here's the thing. Julian turned to look at her, and his expression made her breath catch. Somewhere between pretending and lying and wearing fake rings, it became real. I fell in love with her. Actually, I'd been in love with her the whole time, and last night, I finally told her. A pause. Then Julian's face broke into the most beautiful smile Elara had ever seen. She loves me too, Mom. She loves me back. His voice cracked. So yeah, we're not technically married, but I want to be. For real this time. If she'll have me. Elara dropped her paintbrush. Julian's eyes met hers across the loft. Question and hope and certainty all mixed together. I should go, he said into the phone, not looking away from Elara. I need to ask my fake wife to be my real wife. He hung up, crossed the space between them, dropped to one knee. This is insane, he said. We just confessed our feelings 12 hours ago. I don't have a real ring. We're in our pajamas. This is the worst proposal in history. Julian, but I love you. I've loved you for years. And I don't want to wait another day pretending I haven't been yours from the moment you moved in and started humming that damn song. He reached up, took her hand, touched the wire ring still on her finger. So, Elara, will you marry me? For real this time? She pulled him up, kissed him hard, and whispered against his mouth. We're already wearing the rings. Is that a yes? That's an absolutely, completely, ridiculously yes. They stood there in their loft, in the space they'd fought so hard to keep, in the life they'd built from wire and lies and love that had always been real. Outside, Seattle rain started again, their constant, their comfort. We still need to tell Mrs. Holloway we lied, Elara pointed out. Tomorrow, Julian pulled her closer. Today I just want to be with my fiancé. Fiancé, Elara tested the word. I like that better than wife. You'll be my wife soon enough. Real wife this time. Real wife, Julian agreed, and kissed her until she forgot about landlords and fake certificates and anything that wasn't him. The wire ring felt different now. Elara woke to sunlight in Julian's arm around her waist and the profound knowledge that everything had changed. She turned in his embrace, slowly, carefully, afraid of shattering this new fragile thing between them. He was already awake, watching her with soft eyes. Hi. Hi. Her voice came out shy. After everything they'd done last night, after every confession and kiss and desperate touch, somehow saying good morning felt more intimate. Julian's hand came up to trace her face, her cheekbone, her jaw, her lips, learning her in daylight. No regrets? None. She caught his hand, pressed a kiss to his palm. You? Just that we wasted 3 years being scared. They lay there in the morning light, tangled together, whispering confessions they'd held back for so long. Julian told her about the first time he'd realized he loved her, that fox painting, the afternoon light, her humming. Elara told him about the paintings hidden in her closet, about how she'd been drawing his face for years without admitting why. Show me, he said, the paintings. I want to see how you see me. So she did. Pulled out the stack from her closet, 15 canvases, all of him. Julian at the window, Julian laughing, Julian concentrating on his work, Julian asleep, Julian, rendered in her careful brushstrokes over and over like a prayer. He stood silent, studying each one. When he looked at her again, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. You really love me. I really, really love you. He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. We need to tell Mrs. Halloway the truth. Reality crashed back. The fake marriage, the loft, the consequences of their beautiful lie. We'll lose the apartment. Maybe. Julian pulled her closer. But we'll lose it anyway when she finds out we lied. Better to come clean now, on our terms. And if she kicks us out, then we find somewhere else. Together. Actually together this time, not just pretending. Elara thought about leaving this space, their loft, their home, the place where they'd fallen in love so slowly neither had noticed. I'll miss it. Me too. He rested his forehead against hers. But I'd rather have you in a shitty apartment than this perfect place without you. That's very romantic. You make me romantic. He kissed her again. Besides, we can't build a real marriage on a fake foundation. We have to tell the truth. Tuesday morning felt wrong. Elara woke alone in bed. Julian already up, already at his drafting table, hunched over his work with rigid shoulders. She watched him for a moment, remembering last night, remembering his hands on her skin, his mouth on hers, the way he'd whispered her name like a benediction. Morning, she said softly. Morning. But he didn't look up, didn't smile, just kept drawing, his pencil moving with sharp, angry strokes. Elara felt cold despite the working heater. Julian? What's wrong? Nothing, just busy. His voice was flat. The Riverside proposal is due Friday. I know, but can we not do this right now? He finally looked at her, and his expression was carefully blank. I need to focus. She wanted to push, wanted to ask what happened between last night's confessions and this morning's distance. Wanted to know if he was having regrets after all, if the cold light of day had made him realize he'd made a mistake. Instead, she retreated, took a shower, made coffee, tried to work on her illustration. But she kept glancing at Julian across the loft, his tense posture, the way he wouldn't meet her eyes, the wall he'd rebuilt between them overnight. By afternoon, the silence was suffocating. Elara finally broke. Did I do something wrong? What? No. Julian pushed back from his table, running hands through his hair. Why would you think that? Because you barely looked at me all day. Because you're acting like last night didn't happen. Because I'm starting to think maybe you regret. I don't regret it, he cut her off sharp. Then softer, I could never regret you. Then what's wrong? He was quiet for a long moment. I'm scared. The admission came out raw. We have to tell Mrs. Holloway tomorrow, and there's a good chance we lose this place, lose our home. And I keep thinking, what if that breaks us? What if we can't find anywhere affordable, and you have to move back to Portland, and I have to? His voice cracked. What if I just got you, and now I'm going to lose you? Elara crossed to him, took his face in her hands. Hey, look at me. She waited until his eyes met hers. You're not going to lose me. Loft or no loft, Seattle or Portland or the moon, you're not going to lose me. I love you. That doesn't change based on our zip code. Promise? Promise. She kissed him, soft and certain. We'll figure it out. Together. Wednesday afternoon, Mrs. Holloway knocked. I need to speak with you both. Her voice was cold through the door. Now. Elara and Julian exchanged panicked looks. This was it. Somehow she'd found out. Somehow their beautiful lie had finally caught up with them. They opened the door. Mrs. Holloway stood in the hallway, arms crossed, face stern. Behind her stood another couple, the Johnsons from 2B, the ones married 40 years. May we come in? They stepped aside. The four of them filed into the loft, and Elara felt like she was facing a firing squad. I received an interesting call this morning, Mrs. Holloway began, pacing their space, from the King County Records Office. Apparently, they're updating their digital archives and noticed a discrepancy in their files. Elara's heart stopped. Julian's hand found hers, squeezing tight. A marriage certificate was filed 2 years ago under your names, except, Mrs. Holloway turned to face them. The records office has no record of the ceremony, no officiant's signature, no witness documentation, nothing but a photoshopped image someone very badly faked. The silence was deafening. Elara felt like she might throw up. Mrs. Holloway, we can explain, Julian started. I should hope so. But she didn't sound angry. She sounded disappointed, hurt. You lied to me. You lied to this entire building. You faked legal documents to circumvent our tenant policies. Do you understand how serious this is? We do, Elara's voice shook. We're so sorry. We were desperate. We couldn't afford to move, and your policy seemed unfair, and we made a terrible choice. A terrible choice that could result in criminal charges for falsifying government documents. Mrs. Holloway's voice was sharp. Not to mention immediate eviction. Please, Julian stepped forward. Don't blame Elara. This was my idea. I convinced her. If you need to press charges, press them against me. No, Elara moved to stand beside him. We did this together. We take the consequences together. Mr. Johnson had been silent until now. May I say something? Mrs. Holloway nodded curtly. We've lived here 20 years, the old man said. We've seen a lot of couples come and go. And I'll tell you what I told my wife when we first saw these two at the mixer. They're more married than half the actual married couples in this building. Frank, Mrs. Holloway started. Let me finish, Ruth. He looked at Elara and Julian with kind eyes. The way you look at each other, the way you move around each other, that kiss, that wasn't acting. That was real love, real partnership. So you didn't have a piece of paper. So what? You had everything else that matters. Mrs. Holloway was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice had softened. The law is the law. You falsified documents. I should evict you, press charges. We understand. Elara felt tears building. We'll start packing. However, Mrs. Holloway held up a hand. Mr. Johnson makes a fair point, and I've been in this business long enough to know that love isn't always legal. So here's what's going to happen. She pulled out a card, handed it to Julian. This is my nephew. He's a justice of the peace. You will call him today. You will get legally married, really married, within the week, and you will show me proof of that marriage by next Friday. Elara blinked. You're Giving us a chance? One chance. You will also formally apologize to the other residents at the next mixer for deceiving them, and you will never, ever lie to me again. We won't, we promise. Good. Mrs. Holloway's expression finally softened. Because despite this mess, I like you two. You pay rent on time. You're quiet. You genuinely care about each other. This building needs more of that. She headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and congratulations on the real engagement. You'll make a lovely couple. She left. The Johnsons followed, but Mr. Johnson winked at them on the way out. The door closed. Elara and Julian stood in stunned silence. Did that just happen? Elara finally asked. I think she just told us to get married. Julian looked at the card in his hand. Really married? In a week? Are you okay with that? He turned to her, eyes serious. Are you? Elara thought about the past 3 years, the fake marriage that had become real, the wire ring on her finger that had always meant more than wire. Thought about Julian's face in morning light, and his laugh, and his gentle hands, and the way he'd always felt like home. Yes, she said. I'm very okay with that. We're not doing a big wedding. Thursday morning, coffee and half-hearted breakfast, both of them still processing yesterday's ultimatum. 1 week to get married. Really married, legally married. Agreed. Julian scrolled to his phone, looking at the justice of the peace's availability. Just us. Simple. Quick. My mother will kill me. Elara hadn't told her family yet, hadn't told anyone. How do you explain that you fake married your roommate and then accidentally fell in love and now have to really marry him in a week or face eviction? My mother already knows most of it, Julian grimaced. Remember that call? When I told her we'd lied? She was surprisingly understanding, said she'd suspected something was off from the beginning. Mothers always know. She wants to come, to the wedding, small as it is. He looked up from his phone. Would that be okay? Your mom too, if she can make it on short notice. Elara thought about her mother meeting Julian for the first time on their actual wedding day. This is insane. Completely. He reached across the table, took her hand. But it's our kind of insane. They spent the day making arrangements, called the justice of the peace. He had an opening Saturday afternoon in his office. Called their mothers. Julian's delighted, Elara's confused but supportive once she heard the whole story. Called their closest friends, gave them the abbreviated version. Yes, we're in love. Yes, we're getting married this weekend. Yes, it's sudden. No, we're not pregnant. Yes, we're sure. I don't have a dress, Elara realized Friday morning, panic setting in. Julian, I'm getting married tomorrow and I don't have a dress. Wear what you wore to the mixer. He looked up from where he was attempting to tie a tie. You looked beautiful in that. That was weeks ago, for a fake marriage. This is real. He abandoned the tie, crossed to her. You could wear paint-stained jeans and you'd still be the most beautiful bride I've ever seen. Smooth talker. Truth teller. He kissed her forehead. But if you want to go dress shopping, I'll watch you try on 100 dresses and tell you that you're stunning in every single one. So they went shopping. Elara tried on exactly 3 dresses before finding the one. Simple cream silk, nothing fancy, but it made her feel like a bride. Julian's face when she stepped out of the dressing room told her it was the right one. That one, he said, his voice rough. Definitely that one. That evening they stood in their loft, their soon-to-be legally legitimate marital home, and actually talked about what this meant. Are you scared? Elara asked. Terrified. Julian pulled her close. But not of marrying you, just of screwing it up somehow, of not being enough. You're enough. You've always been enough. She rested her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. I can't believe we're doing this. Getting married, or admitting we've basically been married for 3 years already? Both. She looked up at him. I don't have cold feet, in case you're wondering. I want this. Us. Legally and forever. Forever, Julian repeated, testing the word. I like the sound of that. Saturday morning arrived in golden autumn light. Elara woke alone. Julian had slept on the sofa last night, insisting on at least one wedding tradition. I want to see you walk toward me, he'd said. Want that moment of seeing you as my bride. She lay in bed watching dust motes dance in sunlight, trying to process that today she was getting married. Really married. To Julian. To her best friend, her roommate, her love, her home. Her phone buzzed. A text from Julian, one floor down. Nervous? She typed back. Terrified. You? Same. But I've never been more sure of anything. I love you. I love you too. See you at 2 p.m. Don't be late to our wedding. Wouldn't dream of it. Elara got up, showered, took her time with makeup and hair. Her hands shook the entire time. Her mother arrived at noon, letting herself in with the spare key Elara had finally sent her. Let me see you. Her mother's eyes immediately welled up. Oh, honey, you look beautiful. I look scared. You look happy. Her mother hugged her carefully, mindful of the dress. Tell me again how this happened. So Elara did. The whole story, the fake marriage, the slow realization, the 3 years of loving him quietly. Her mother listened, occasionally laughing, occasionally wiping her eyes. I always knew you'd marry someone creative, her mother said when Elara finished. Someone who understood the way you see the world. But I never expected you to accidentally fall into it. Is it crazy, marrying him this fast? Sweetie, you've been living with him for 3 years. You know his worst habits, his best qualities, how he takes his coffee, how he looks when he's sick. Most couples don't know that until after the wedding. She squeezed Elara's hand. You're not rushing. You're just catching up to where you already are. At 1:30, they headed to the Justice of the Peace's office. Small building, simple room, nothing fancy. Julian's mother was already there, talking animatedly with Julian's best friend from grad school. A few other close friends scattered in chairs. And Julian, standing at the front in a dark suit, hands in pockets, looking nervous and beautiful, and like he might bolt or cry or both. Then he saw her. His face transformed. Shock, joy, love, awe. His hand went to his chest like his heart hurt. Hi, Elara said when she reached him. Hi, his voice cracked. You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. You're not so bad yourself. The Justice of the Peace cleared his throat. Shall we begin? The Justice of the Peace, Mark, Julian's uncle by marriage, smiled at them kindly. Julian and Elara have asked to write their own vows. Julian, whenever you're ready. Julian took Elara's hands. His fingers trembled slightly. The wire ring, their fake ring, was still on her finger. Tomorrow they'd add a real one, but for now, this was enough. He swallowed hard. I've been trying to write these vows all week. Filled up 5 notebooks trying to find the right words. Because how do you put 3 years of friendship and love and quiet mornings into a few sentences? He paused, gathering himself. I can't promise I'll never make mistakes. Can't promise I'll always know the right thing to say. But I can promise this. I will love you when you're humming Vivaldi without realizing it. I will love you when you have paint in your hair and deadlines you're stressed about. I will love you when we're fighting about whose turn it is to do dishes. I will love you in our beautiful loft or in a tiny apartment or anywhere else we end up. Because home isn't a place, it's you. His voice cracked. I promise to make your coffee exactly how you like it every morning. To give you the Western light you need for painting. To listen when you talk about color theory, even though I only barely understand it. To be the person you tell everything to, the way you've been that person for me. I promise to choose you every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Because you're worth choosing, Al. You've always been worth choosing. Elara was crying. Mark handed her a tissue. Elara? Mark prompted gently. She looked at Julian, at the man she'd loved for so long without saying it, at his eyes, bright with unshed tears, at his hands holding hers like she was precious. Julian, her voice shook. I fell in love with you so slowly I didn't realize it was happening. One morning at a time, one shared coffee, one quiet evening. You became essential to me like breathing, so natural I didn't notice until I tried to imagine my life without you, and couldn't. She squeezed his hands. I promise to hum while I paint, even though you claim it distracts you, because we both know you're lying. I promise to steal your hoodies because they smell like you, and they're warmer than mine. I promise to watch you work on your architectural drawings and think about how lucky I am that you chose me, that out of everyone you want to spend your mornings with me. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I promise to love you when you're confident and when you're doubting yourself, when you're healthy and when you're sick, when we have money and when we're eating ramen for the third night in a row. I promise to be honest with you. No more fake marriages, no more hiding feelings, just us being real with each other. And I promise to choose you back, every single day, for the rest of my life. Julian was openly crying now. So was his mother. So was everyone in the small room. Do you have rings? Mark asked. Elara looked at the wire ring on her finger. Julian followed her gaze, then smiled, understanding. Actually, Julian said, we already do. He touched the wire ring on her finger, the one he'd made weeks ago from sculpture wire, in desperate hope. This one's good enough for me, if it's good enough for you. It's perfect. Elara touched the matching ring on his finger. It's us. Mark laughed, wiping his own eyes. Well then, by the power vested in me by the state of Washington, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Julian, you may kiss your bride. Julian cupped her face in his hands, gentle and sure. Finally, he whispered. Finally, she agreed, and he kissed her, soft and sweet and real. No audience to perform for, no lie to maintain. Just them, finally honest, finally brave, finally married for real. To the bride and groom! Julian's grad school friend raised his glass in the tiny Italian restaurant they'd reserved for dinner. 10 people total, their mothers, a handful of close friends, all squeezed around one long table. Nothing fancy, nothing planned. Perfect. Elara sat beside Julian, his arm around her shoulders, her head resting against him. She still wore the cream silk dress. He'd loosened his tie but kept the jacket. They looked like they'd stepped out of an elopement photograph, happy and slightly dazed and very much in love. Tell us the story, someone called out. The real story. How did this happen? Julian and Elara exchanged glances. Where to even start? We lied, Julian said simply, to keep our apartment, told everyone we were married when we weren't. And then we fell in love, Elara added, or realized we were already in love. The timeline's fuzzy. They were in love from day one, Julian's mother interjected. I knew it the first time he mentioned her. Said, my roommate, with this tone, she demonstrated, voice going soft and warm. You did not, Julian protested. I absolutely did. A mother knows. Laughter rippled around the table. Stories were shared. Julian's friend talked about how he'd rambled about Elara's artwork for 40 minutes once. Elara's mother told the story of Elara calling her drunk one night, crying because Julian had a date and she didn't know why it hurt so much. We were idiots, Elara summarized. The best kind of idiots, Julian said, kissing her temple. The kind that eventually get their act together. After dinner, they walked back to the loft, their home, now legally their shared marital home. The Seattle streets were quiet, autumn cool, leaves skittering across sidewalks. Julian held her hand, thumb tracing circles on her ring finger. How does it feel, he asked, being married, for real this time? Exactly the same as fake married, Elara leaned into him, except I get to keep you. You always had me, the paperwork was just catching up. They climbed the stairs to their fourth-floor loft. Home. Julian unlocked the door, then surprised her by scooping her up. "Julian!" "Tradition," he said, carrying her over the threshold. "Gotta have at least one." He set her down gently in their living room, their space, full of paintings and architectural drawings, and 3 years of life lived together. Nothing had changed. Everything had changed. "I love our home," Elara said. "I love you." Julian pulled her close. "The home is just a bonus." They stood there in the quiet, holding each other, both thinking about how close they'd come to losing this, how a desperate lie had led them to the truth. "Thank you," Julian said softly. "For what?" "For saying yes to the fake marriage, for going along with my crazy plan, for falling in love with me anyway." "I didn't fall in love with you anyway." Elara looked up at him. "I fell in love with you because of all of it. The desperation and the lies and the wire rings and the way you kissed me at that mixer like your life depended on it." "It did depend on it." His arms tightened around her. "My whole life depended on you saying yes." Sunday morning, their first morning as actual married people, Elara woke to sunlight and Julian's steady breathing and the profound contentment of exactly where she wanted to be. She studied his sleeping face, relaxed, peaceful, beautiful in the way he never believed when she told him. His eyes opened, caught her watching. "Hi, wife." "Hi, husband." The word felt right in her mouth. "How does it feel?" "Exactly the same." He pulled her closer. "Still you, still me, still this." They lay there in comfortable silence, listening to Seattle wake up outside their windows. No rush, no crisis, no deadline. Just a quiet Sunday morning with nowhere else to be. "We should probably tell the building," Elara said. "Show Mrs. Halloway the real marriage certificate." "Later," Julian kissed her shoulder. "Right now I just want to lie here with my actual wife and not think about landlords or lies or anything except how lucky I am." Sweet talker. Truth teller. He propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at her with such open love it took her breath away. "I'm going to tell you I love you every single day, multiple times a day, until you get sick of hearing it." "Never going to happen." "Good, because I plan to be annoying about it." He kissed her, slow and thorough. "I love you, Elara Hart." "I love you too, though technically it's Elara Reeves now, or Hart Reeves. We never actually discussed that." "You can be whatever name makes you happy. You're still my wife either way." She liked the sound of that. Wife. Real wife. Legal wife. Wife who chose him and was chosen back. "Want to get breakfast?" Julian asked. "That place on Pike you like?" "In a minute." Elara pulled him back down. "First, I want to just be here. With you. In our home. On our first real morning as a married couple." "I can do that." He settled back beside her, pulling her against his chest. "I can definitely do that." They stayed in bed another hour, talking quietly about nothing important. About paint colors and client deadlines and what to have for dinner. Domestic and simple, and exactly what Elara had dreamed of for 3 years without admitting it. Finally they got up, made coffee together, toast with too much butter, moved around each other in their small kitchen with practiced ease, except now Julian could kiss her whenever he wanted, could wrap his arms around her from behind while she stirred cream into her mug, could say, "I love you," without fear. "I could get used to this," Elara said. "Good, because you're stuck with me now." Julian handed her a plate. "Legally stuck, no takebacks." "No takebacks," she agreed, and meant it with every atom of her being. The photographs hung on the wall told their story. Elara stood back, studying the collage she'd created. The cropped photos from their fake marriage days, coffee shop laughter, Vancouver rain, Pike Place Market. The real wedding photos, Julian's face when he first saw her in the dress, their kiss at the altar, their clasped hands with those wire rings. And new ones, their actual honeymoon to the San Juan Islands, Christmas with both families. Julian's architectural firm opening with Elara at his side. 3 years of friendship, 1 year of fake marriage, 1 year of real marriage. 5 years of loving this man in all its forms. "You're humming," Julian said from his drafting table. "Am I?" But she knew she was. Vivaldi. Always Vivaldi when she was happy. Always. He set down his pencil, crossed to stand behind her, his arms wrapped around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. "I love watching you work. I love that you love watching me work." She leaned back into him. "Did you finish the proposal?" "Submitted 10 minutes ago. The Seattle Historical Society loved it." His voice carried satisfaction. "We're officially restoring the Paramount Theater." "Julian, that's incredible." She turned in his arms to kiss him properly. "We should celebrate." "Agreed. How do you feel about that Italian place? The one from our wedding dinner?" "Perfect." But she wasn't moving, just holding him in the afternoon light, in their loft that they'd fought so hard to keep. "I was thinking, dangerous, that maybe it's time." Julian pulled back to look at her. "Time for what?" "Time to get real rings." She touched the wire on her finger, worn thin now after 2 years of constant wear. "These have been perfect, but maybe we deserve something that won't break." "These didn't break," Julian pointed out. "They bent and scratched and wore down, but they held." "Poetic." "I'm feeling poetic." He kissed her nose. "But you're right, real rings, to go with our real marriage and our real life." "Together," Elara said. "We picked them out together. Always together." They stood there in their loft, home, finally and legally and truly theirs. The light was perfect, golden and warm, the way it always was on autumn afternoons. Outside, Seattle hummed with life. Inside, they had everything they needed. "I need to tell you something," Julian said, suddenly serious. Elara's heart jumped. "What?" "Mrs. Holloway called. The building's going condo. We can buy our unit if we want." "Buy it?" Elara's mind raced. "Can we afford that? With the Paramount contract?" "Barely, but yeah." He studied her face. "Do you want to? Buy this place? Make it permanently ours?" She looked around their space, their easel and drafting table, their shared bedroom, their tiny kitchen where they'd fallen in love over morning coffee. The windows that let in perfect light, the exposed brick that had witnessed every moment of their slow-burn love story. "Yes," she said, "I want this, all of it, forever." "Forever," Julian echoed, and kissed her like he had at their wedding, like he did every morning, like he would keep doing for the rest of their lives. The wire ring caught the light one last time, a promise kept. Tomorrow they'd go ring shopping. Next week they'd sign papers to buy their home. Next month, next year, for all the years after, they'd keep choosing each other, keep building this life they'd accidentally created. But right now, in this moment, Elara just held her husband in the golden light and thought about how the best things in life were the ones you didn't plan. The ones that snuck up on you disguised as desperate lies and wire rings and roommates you were definitely not supposed to fall in love with. The ones that became real when you finally stopped pretending. Outside, rain started, Seattle's constant companion. Inside, Elara and Julian stood wrapped in each other, in their home, in their hard-won happy ending that was really just their beginning. She started humming, Vivaldi, of course. Julian smiled against her hair. "There it is, my favorite sound. Besides, I love you? That's tied for first." He tightened his arms around her, along with "I do." And in their loft, with rain on the windows and love in the air and wire rings on their fingers, they stayed exactly where they belonged. Together, always together.